Hello, everyone. Ready to get started? So we've got a presentation called Stop, Collaborate, and Listen, Enhancing Your Understanding of an Effective OT-OTA Relationship. Presenting is Julie Larouche, who has been in OT academia for 20 years. She is currently the program director for the Masters of Occupational Therapy program at the University of Southern Maine. Julie has taught in the OTA program at KVCC for many years and is an expert in the OT-OTA roles. She has had the pleasure of working collaboratively with occupational therapy assistants in a variety of OT practice settings. John Krasnavage is currently a faculty member in the Occupational Therapy Assistant program at Kennebec Valley Community College. He has been a practicing COTA for many years and frequently provides education on the role of OTAs to OT students at various universities. So welcome.
Let's kick it.
All right. So did anybody, when they read the title, get the Stop, Collaborate, and Listen?
Shane did.
Shane did. Some of you
Ice is
did.
back with a brand new invention.
Welcome, everyone. We're happy to be here today. So I'm Julie Larouche, John Krasnavage. We're here today to talk to you and just to really remind everybody about the role of the occupational therapist and occupational therapy assistant, which John is, which we had to clarify, right? So today, hopefully we'll have some case studies, we'll have some fun stuff to do and make it.
Going to be interactive, so
Because we know we got the 2 o'clock.
prepare yourselves. I'm going to be giving you pop quizzes throughout the session. See if you can get the answer correct.
Yes. So let me go to the next slide. Here we go.
What a good time for the first pop quiz. Who, the OT, the OTA, or the OT practitioner, is responsible for providing safe and effective OT services under the supervision and in partnership with the occupational therapist? The who? The who? Ah, the OTA, yes.
No, we're going to work on language today. It's so, no, it's okay. Right,
Ooh,
right.
Good. So you're in the right place.
Yeah, yes. No shaming here. You want to do another one?
Sure.
We don't have prizes, but
We
we'll.
don't, we should have. Who uses current assessments and assessment procedures in screening, evaluation, and reevaluation? The OT? Practitioner?
Both?
Yes, both. Work in collaboration.
Okay, so we're just gonna have fun a little bit today. So some quizzes and stuff. So this is our short course. This is actually we do this with our students when we have an OTA collaboration day. And a lot of the things we're doing here is just when we do it and faculty come, they're like, oh, this is a great reminder. This is just something we want to always keep on the forefront of our foreheads and be like, yeah, this is good information. So what's our role today? John, what are we doing today?
Our role today is to.
Our objectives. What's our objective?
Our objective is to define and understand the roles of OT and OTA collaborative processes in the workplace.
Okay. So here we go. Some of the official documents that we're going to use today and that we refer to and that everybody should refer to is obviously the Code of Ethics, the OT Code of Ethics, the Maine State Licensure Board, if you have a license in the state of Maine, Scope of Practice. These are all AOTA documents, Scope of Practice, Standards of Practice, Guidelines for Supervision. So sometimes people will ask us questions and we have to go to those documents to really look and to see what's the question they're asking, what's the information. It's not always black and white. It can be subjective, and I think it's meant to be for a reason. So those are the documents that we're going to use. We're going to share them with you folks. We're going to have you folks refer to them today with our case studies that we have.
Does anyone know where to find those documents? Yeah, I see. Definitely. Yes, it's over here. Anyone in the back? Yes, good.
Those are the students, they know.
Yeah,
They're fine.
oh, yeah, that's right.
They're all
An
AOTA
educated lot.
members, yeah.
This table here, no, that's some people.
The best resource, I mean, obviously AOTA.org is the best place to find official documents. And they are what guides our practice, as well as whatever state you're working in. You want to look at those and see where they actually are the same, are they different, how do they work? So. Cool. So Missy talked earlier, very first thing, I was so happy she talked about language. We're gonna talk about language because we think it's really important. And it's, I just heard, you know, like, I'm older, you know, I don't have folks that I work with because it's true. We used to use, you know, so this is John, he's my coda. How does that feel?
I don't like it.
You want to have a moment?
Yeah. Or Justa.
Justa.
You mentioned Justa. Well, I'm just an OTA. I can't really do that. You have to know what your responsibility and your role is professionally.
And have the confidence to say, I am the occupational therapy assistant, and because I chose to be, you know, and that's the thing that I think folks don't always remember is that these, you know, folks, we chose an occupation. We chose to be an occupational therapist or an occupational therapy assistant. And that's important. I've educated many, many individuals with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and even doctorate degrees that have come back because they wanted to be an occupational therapy assistant because they liked what that role was. So that's important for everybody just to always have it in the back of their head. Yeah. They chose it.
Internationally, it's not a recognized term. If you say even COTA or OTR in any setting other than the United States, people won't know what you're talking about. So OTA and OT, or occupational therapist and occupational therapy assistant, even more specifically, is the recognized term.
We always like to use person-first language, obviously, even with, you know, when we talk about diagnoses, you know, it's not, you know, the spinal cord injury client, it's the client with a spinal cord injury. So think of that too when you're talking about language, how we identify ourselves. Okay, so language is person-first language is super important. We already did occupational therapist.
And
go ahead.
I think it's important to realize what your role is, because there's so many practices that either OTAs are not utilized because we're not sure of their worth or what their capabilities are. So it's important for practitioners to know exactly what they're capable of. Many are underutilized and some are overutilized in some senses. Well, I'll just do that evaluation. Okay, here's the next pop quiz. Can an OTA do an evaluation? Kind of a trick question. There you go. So you can do the assessment, correct? But you cannot synthesize and interpret data. Good.
We're taught well.
Yeah. Nice job. Yeah, good job.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd like to point out to folks when I'm doing education, especially with students, is that it's the therapy and the therapist. You know, they're physical therapist assistants and they assist the therapist, where occupational therapy assistants assist the actual therapy that's being done. So I'd like to point that out as well.
I'd like to point out this typo as well.
I'm
just kidding.
I did. That was me.
What did it say?
I'm sorry.
And I didn't catch it quick enough. We didn't catch it quick enough.
No.
So I also want to point out that the state licensure, if you go in and look at state licensure, does anyone know what occupational therapy assistant is listed as? It'd be infuriating for some of you. Yeah. What is it?
It's a therapist.
Yeah, occupational therapist assistant. So our own state doesn't even know what our title is as OTAs.
Where's Sue?
I didn't know that. I've never noticed it.
Yeah, and you know what, that's the thing, by default, stuff like that, we don't notice. We don't notice. And when it's written in language for a rule, whether it's Medicare and they leave out that, if they leave out, if they just say the occupational therapist will, it leaves out the occupational therapy assistant being able to do that job, whether it's modalities or something else. So we like to use occupational therapy practitioners when we're talking about the delivery of services, when it comes to rules and stuff. And I really like that language.
Absolutely.
When both can do something.
I think it's important to keep in mind that the relationship between the OT and the OTA is not, it's not like the scales of justice, right? It's side by side. We work together in collaboration because a lot of times the OT will be doing several evaluations, and who's going to see the client the most? Who's responsible for most of the intervention implementation? Right, well, it does depend. They both can, right? But a lot of times in many practice environments, it's going to be the occupational therapy assistant doing most of the interventions. So can we contribute to goals as an OTA? Maybe not initially. We can contribute to them, right? But we can't write them. But we can change them up in collaboration with the OT because we're going to see that progress. We're going to use our clinical reasoning to say, hey, this person met their goal, or they're working toward, or it's too far above. We have to downgrade it, right? So there's a lot of things that we're always, it's a dynamic process between the two of us.
You want to do a quiz question? You find one while I keep talking.
Yeah.
I know, this is a
I thought I
good,
just did.
good quiz opportunity. I know, we got a lot of them.
All right, okay.
All right. What questions do folks have for us right now? Kim?
I just recently submitted, I didn't do it, but an article was just submitted, and when I wanted it to be put through, I wanted to use the words occupational therapy practitioner, and I was told that occupational therapist was the correct terms. And it infuriated me, but I don't know what to do about it because that's the most derogative.
Huh.
Or did you not? Maybe, I can't remember.
I would recommend that you send them some documents from AOTA saying that why the two, but yeah, that's frustrating.
So practitioner should be the all-encompassing
And
term.
that was the term I wanted to use, was just practitioner. But we were told no.
I would say that would take some advocating for what that term means and why it's important.
Were you able to spell, could you say the occupational therapist and the occupational therapy assistant? They wouldn't even want occupational therapy assistant in there.
They said that occupational therapist was inclusive in their eyes.
That's broad.
So yeah, we
This is
need,
getting
we
I
need
know.
to do more education. Yeah.
Let's write him a letter together.
Along those lines, there was a discussion recently around strategic planning for the association, where someone pointed out that when we use occupational therapy practitioners, we're trying to be inclusive, but that occupational therapy assistants might be hidden in that. And so her recommendation was to use the full occupational therapists and occupational therapy assistants when we are writing publications, presenting, et cetera, rather than practitioners.
No, that's great, thanks.
And there's no harm in using both, right? It's right to make sure you
You have a
want
question
that
back
point.
here, Julie, on
Oh,
it. It's always better to just let her get that.
Please forgive my ignorance. I haven't worked in our field for a while, but have some questions because there's a possibility of working with OTs and OTs.
Great.
My field, which is patient rehab therapists. And so I have a question about, we'll probably get to this supervision and also about, in particular about the Medicare reimbursement. Someone, I think you raised the idea of importance to have
have the language reflect that OTA could get reimbursed that way, so is there just a general summary of what is or isn't covered for OTAs?
So we will get to that. I think you will find, and then after you will certainly can answer questions about, because we want folks to kind of here develop a justification plan, like how do I justify within my facility, what are the resources that I need to have an occupational therapy assistant at my site? Yeah.
And it depends on the insurance as well. If we're talking about part A, part B, exactly what the scope of practice is that we're looking at. So there's a lot of moving parts in that. So specifically, if we wanted to explore it after the session too, we could look further into it. But there's a lot to it.
Okay. So, John, case studies. You want to break them up?
I had one more question.
Oh, go ahead.
One more quiz. Who can discharge a client from services? OT, OTA, or both? That's all right, yeah. Anyone else? Maddie, you know. Yes, so yes, the OT actually does the discharge, but the OTA can contribute to the discharge and even write up the entire note. Right, and go through all of the past documentation and say, this is why this person is being discharged, recommended for discharge. But the OT has to do the final discharge. Good, yes.
I don't know this, but so at my company, there are it's all, I mean, we are at a level of playing field that you can possibly get to. And that things like sanitary, discharge summaries and all of that stuff is generated and started by the OTAs, and then the collaboration happens after they are done writing it all up and adjusting goals, and then the conversation of this is why I adjusted that goal, or this is why this goal is being discharged, or this is why I use that reason to justify an entire discharge summary here. And then it's just still collaboration at that point, and the OT might talk on it, agreement, but it very much don't segregate any of those things. It is 100% collaboration.
So Maddie, can I ask you a follow-up question? What would that trust and level of supervision depend upon?
Yeah, hear it out. So when you get training grads at school, you very specific level of supervision in that first year of practice. I don't know if anybody's read through the regulations as far as supervision and stuff goes, but CME doesn't have very specific criteria on the number of hours that are required in supervision, or it is very vague and open for interpretation. And so you can dictate it per person. So some students might come to school and they're really strong and they're ready to roll, and they've got impact changes, and some students might come out and be like, I'm very interested and I'm just dirty, but I'm really willing to kind of step in and work through it. Since we tailor our supervision based off of where that person is at individually, so it might be needing that to look at the goals and reduce those. Might be monthly different design, every other month, and then we're getting through pairs and goals and talking about grading and upgrading and downgrading and what that means developmentally, functionally, and all of this.
So they have to be deemed competent in the areas that you're.
Similar to the assessment. So, if they're doing like assessment, like the that we do in service, to develop competency in the assessments that they might be in, and then once competency is established, then they're contributing to the evaluation process. So reeval is just where that level of
I love that.
So for anyone that's not clear on how you establish competency, it's getting the same results as the OT or whoever is experienced in that assessment. So they're saying, all right, we got the same results. I deem you competent to give this assessment. Does that make sense? All right, good.
Okay, so looks like we have some OTAs in here, some occupational therapy assistants in here. We have some teams. There's a team here and there's a team back there, right? And then newbies, right, that don't really know much. Maybe you folks know more, but just don't have an OTA on staff. Is that correct? Okay, so maybe we can, and we have some students. So let's try to divide us up so that in groups of 3. How about that?
Sure.
Okay, so if there's a team back there, if like half of you want to go back there with a student, and then we can have another group over here, and then we can have another group back in here. We're gonna do a quick few case studies.
And some of these are blue and some of these are black because my printer started to run out of ink, so.
Oh, I thought you need some black and white. Okay, so let's take a quick minute and we're gonna hand out some documents. We're gonna have you do a couple case studies and then you can find the resources in your AOTA documents. So we're gonna go on pause here for folks that are at home. We will post these for you folks.
Can you see this at home or is that backward? Oh, okay, perfect. So I'm going to try and angle this so that you are able to see the first and hopefully second scenario. And if you want to work on it together, you can just kind of put your answers in the chat box and we will address you. Thanks. Trying to figure this out here. Nope, they can see it, but I'm just trying to make it so they.
Oh, it's the where? Hold it up. No.
You can see both of them. Oh, where's she? Put her in. If you can read this, just let me know when to go to the next scenario.
Yeah.
Oh.
Copy and paste. There's the second one. I had no cards. So like what we're gonna do.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Not at that setting, but in the COVID. At the time. So she was here at that point, and I would bring a laptop. First, we will work on this. Saturday, so that she could see the measurements and vital. Still part of that process. We just try to do things.
Yeah.
You know,
Nice.
I work with people that means
Or not provided. Yeah. Some mental health hospitals, they're doing it for because they're not necessarily required. Wondered why we didn't now nothing.
Yeah.
And here's like, I feel like that was such a small part of my then we get out of the field. And it's together so much. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Is like, years longer than me, so also I'm want to come in and get them credit. Yeah, yeah. I think COVID mileage. I think it just got started like before something, so we were just involved in that's what I'm about to start reading. Oh, Scott, very nice. The large board, so I don't know what they. Yeah, so it's like, why would this matter? You know, I'm lucky I'm there. Yeah. But every other place that I've ever worked, you know. Yeah. Yes, there's. Yeah, like Stockholm, Freeman, like this is stuff here, so. Yeah. Possible. I mean, this one, but then what? What month? So, thank you for time. But they didn't allow it.
No problem, Logan. Good to have you.
Right.
Supposed to be in there.
Okay, that's right. Sounds to be volunteer, too much. Yeah, she had a other. So I'm working in school. And my caseload doesn't also come up in there. So so the question that's going on. I'm not even letting they gave me their own use for that. They wanted to not get it. Well, that's.
No. No proof. I've worked in my house for a long time, but no proof.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, there are different ways, I'm just, you know, and that, you know, it's kind of hard to do. Right, like this, right, there's scenario two, away from the start.
So that's what.
Role, or number,
Well, I think the.
for me, yeah, it's just kind of. Right.
Talking about implementing all of it, it's not just like, well, I think that's like.
Right.
And I also know that you-
We didn't. That's it.
And my main, So. Mine is about two. Machine writing. Good, yeah. And phase one, probably done. All the implementing plans.
But I can't.
But you would have to have.
It would have been increased.
Somebody have-
That's like that. You have to. Right.
A person out on maternity leave. You said- Five. That's it.
Right now. Then you can. Well, yeah. Question. So that's the word. You find some of that. Apparently. I don't know. I don't think I get. But it's not. And I like to read Christian progress, check out it, but it's writing notes for Catholic. Right.
You're out.
I'm like,
Being like.
but that's why you need a. Fully. I have seen. Also, my parents. Or in a. Happens. Like. But like. I'm putting good. Back on them.
We'll bring it back in about 2 more minutes. Oh. Nice. We have chats. Well done, Logan.
That's awesome.
Pictures.
So that.
There's another one.
You guys tell me what we did, Logan.
Or at least have them think about Yeah. All right, everyone. I know we're having great conversation and it's important conversation. But we're just gonna go over these case scenarios real quick. See what you came up with. If you got to them through all the conversation, that was very important going on. All right, so scenario number 1. Jenny has been a certified occupational therapy assistant for 6 months. She works in an acute care hospital setting. She was asked by the occupational therapist to evaluate a new client's ADL skills, and she recorded the results on the OT department's ADL form. She was then asked to formulate the ADL intervention goals to be added to the rest of the intervention plan, which was developed by the occupational therapist. Were the actions of the OT and the OTA team in sync with the roles and standards of OT practice?
Who says yes?
Chirp, chirp.
Who says no?
Why? Yes. We can't do that according to which standard? So Logan says via Zoom needs supervision according to Chapter 5 under the Maine Board of Occupational Therapy Practice on maine.gov. So thank you, Logan. That is correct. Nailed it. All right. Scenario number 2. Harry is a licensed occupational therapy assistant, and he recently took a job as a staff OTP, which is occupational therapy practitioner, at a prison mental health rehabilitation program. There is no occupational therapist available as they recently left on maternity leave. Harry's temporary supervisor is the certified recreation therapist specialist. Harry is told that his responsibilities include developing and implementing OT intervention plans and documenting OT services until the OT returns. Harry thinks he is supposed to have some form of OT supervision. Is he correct or incorrect? He is correct.
What happens if he doesn't? He could lose his license, right? And he could, what about the person on maternity leave? Can they lose their license?
Right. Yep, absolutely. If they knew about it.
If they knew about it. Yeah.
It doesn't seem like,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like he has a supervisor at this time, so he shouldn't technically even be practicing at this facility at all if there's no supervision available at all.
Is there any way we can rectify that problem?
Well, that's what I was talking to them about as an OTI. I have to have a supervisor of record with the board of licensure in the state of Maine. So in that scenario, it doesn't say anything about it, but maybe the supervisor that's on maternity leave is his supervisor of record, in which case they're okay. But yeah, it has to be listed. And if you change jobs, you've got to notify the licensure board within 10 days or whatever it is, and it has to be somebody of record.
Good.
But I
Exactly.
don't think the rehab program itself would take some responsibility, to talk about those specific OT losing their license.
So it's the OTA's responsibility. Yeah, it's the OT and OTA's responsibility to make sure they have that supervision. And it's not the OT's responsibility to say it's time for supervision now. It's the OTA's responsibility to seek out that supervision and know exactly what they need. So yeah, so that depends on service competency. So entry-level practitioners always need anyone? What kind of supervision?
More.
Most. So close. Yeah, close supervision.
And I didn't print those off, but you can find those on the Maine state licensure. It says the level of supervision and it's, they're a little subjective, like I said, because when somebody moves from close to direct to, from direct to close to general supervision, it's that relationship you establish with each other.
Set number of hours.
There's no hours, there's no years.
That's what I was saying to them.
Right.
So for my social work license, it very clearly states that I need to have, that I had to have log and submit it with my application, the whole thing.
Right. No, it's when you,
A question about that. So when we do move between those levels of supervision, how is that established?
Go ahead.
no, this is your case study.
In collaboration with the OT. So if they establish that service competency,
Do they have to document that with some sort of stuff or the?
they would have to have it documented. Yes. So if they took another job, for instance, and another OT came in and they were not their supervisor anymore, they would have to have some kind of documentation stating that this is the kind of supervision I receive and this is why.
And it's always important to document your meetings, your supervision meetings, when you talk about the clients, what did you talk about? How are they progressing? You have that, whether it's every week, you document that when you're meeting with them. And then you can determine if, you're doing great, I understand where you're coming from. You understand where I'm coming from. Patient outcomes are great. We're gonna do less contact. We're gonna progress to that next level. So supervision.
In my experience, some of it is correlated with the practice area as well.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
if you're working in a hospital on an acute rehab unit or even a SNF on a rehab unit, where the OT is probably going to be treating quite a bit as well, and you don't have as much contact with each other on a day-to-day basis,
Right.
you're gonna have to set that time aside specifically at
Yep.
some point, to have the supervision versus the practice I work in now, where I'm in and out of my supervisor's office daily.
Yeah.
You know, and so we don't have a set time where we get together on Mondays at 9 to do
Right.
this because it's pretty much a constant. So I think that the practice area kind of fits it, so a little bit.
Well, yeah, look at home health.
Right.
You might not see your supervisor or face to face for 3 weeks. So you have to have other methods and I see you. Hold on. One second. So supervision is not what it sounds like all the time. Like, oh, it's just the OT being like, okay, listen, this is what you need to do. And this is how it is. Sometimes it can be collaborating on a treatment plan. They can say, hey, this is what I've done so far. I think these goals are being met. It can be looking at new evidence-based practice together. And this is all collaboration. It's just not one side saying this is what you need to do. It can even be the OTA. I know you were saying that you're a relatively new practitioner and OTA has been there for several years. So supervision is also the OTA kind of showing you what's going on. And like, this is what we usually do. This is what we look at. This is the assessments we use and things like that. So it's not just one-sided. Both. I think, well, yeah.
I understand what students, of course, with the documentation of those in school, but is the documentation of the supervision of the person is on the job, as they become an employee, is there a guideline about that?
The facility usually has some kind of binder that they keep all of the hours of supervision. And so while our license doesn't dictate how much supervision we get, facilities may. So if you're working for a nationwide company, they may just take the most stringent supervision regulation and just implement it all around the nation. And that could be for everybody. So everybody meets at lunchtime for supervision, team-wide, whether you're an OT, PT, OTA, PTA, speech therapist, everyone gets supervision. So it's dependent.
And even just a phone call, just write it down, like talk to my supervisor on this date for this many times about X number of clients, it's just that documentation piece. Obviously, we know how important documentation is, but that documentation piece is important when, if anything comes up for licensure, they might want to see, your supervision log. So that's always good to have.
I'm not, yeah,
Sorry, we did give Tim here a task to work with your new lobby. What's the name again? I don't know why.
to change the terminology.
Well,
Oh, okay.
chapter 5, section 2, section 3. You can see that on page 2.
Yes,
Yeah. Anyone else see it?
the terminology.
DOTA.
And I think, so I was enraged, and Missy knows the story about a commercial our college ran without consulting us that said occupational therapist assistant, and then did not define the profession accurately. So when you say therapist assistant, you are assisting the therapist directly. Like physical therapist assistants directly assist the therapist. They say, I need you to do this. I'm delegating this to you. Do this and report back. We are occupational therapy assistants because we assist the therapeutic process. So language is important. So I won't read this whole thing here. So I guess I kind of have to. Well, let's skip to the,
What do you?
what do you think?
Case study 3.
We don't have to go through it
It was good.
because Competency.
Good,
He's established service competency, right?
right.
So he is good to give that assessment.
Excellent.
Good.
Yay. And I love the rich dialogue that folks were having. So that was great.
Hey.
Oh, were you done?
Oh, do we want to talk about the?
We have a lot.
Man.
So I think this is something that John and I would be happy to meet with anybody to do, to your justification plan. Like, you can talk to us about why you would like to have an occupational therapy assistant at your facility and how we can help do that. John and the most in the pocket, John and I are certainly happy to do that with folks if anybody wants some support doing that. Developing that.
So just before we have questions, and we have had a lot of questions. I think it's important for those of you that do take students often and you hire OTAs, you're very familiar with what an OT does. I want you to think about a justification plan for having OT students and OTA students on the same site. And kind of allowing that collaboration to happen while they're students, so they know what to expect when they graduate and they have to work together. Maddie, I know you already do this. She's should pat yourself on the back because you do a fantastic job. And if you do not utilize OTAs, maybe think about a justification plan for hiring OTAs and taking OTA students, because you get them trained, hire them like that. So if you are interested in taking an OTA student or OT student, we have cards available. Yeah, I'm plugging it right now, but.
I think one of the nice things, especially if you're an occupational therapist and you're thinking about having an occupational therapy assistant, or having one in your facility, is to take a student, because the students know what they are supposed to do. They are, especially occupational therapy assistant students, they know their role better than occupational therapists. Students know their role. So we do 1 day of class with the role of, between the OT and OTA role, whereas occupational therapy assistant students, that's all we talk about is their role. What can you do? What can't you do? Why can't you do it? Those sorts of things. So having a student, an OTA student, is a great, I'm plugging for you, John. But don't forget the OT students from your family.
We could have
And
titled this,
Hudson.
we could have titled this "Slow Your Roll." If
So
you don't
your
know
role. Okay. Next. John. What questions do you folks have still? Yeah, I'm gonna.
I'm just really curious, what the job opportunities are for occupational therapy assistants out there in Maine.
They're currently all over the place. We have so many openings. To the point where they've been open for months at a time. I, as OTA faculty, get all of these job openings. Please pass these along to your graduates or students.
Because the shortages of.
There is a shortage.
Educational technicians. I'm wondering if most of the occupational therapy assistants could go that way.
So there is a wide variety of job titles with that degree that you can take on as well, but there's also an OTA shortage currently in the state.
Oh.
So we need more. They're
Okay. I thought it was the.
no.
No, and I think you won't see them on Indeed or any of those things, at least from my experience from being at KVCC. They would, the folks, instead of paying for marketing, they would just automatically like, hey, any of your alum or anybody, so the job posts usually come to us, and then we share them with our students and our alum. It usually doesn't get on Indeed or any of those big marketplaces.
But MeOTA has something.
But MeOTA does, yeah, same, you'll see them at some of those places, but you won't see them as prevalent in.
They at least come to us
general.
first
They come to us first,
before post.
and we're getting them all the time, I know.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, really?
But I didn't-
Yep.
Wow.
No, I-
Company about work.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
have something to add to that. I'm a second year OTA student and I was looking at every website last night. And the amount of occupational therapist assistant I saw was really shocking. I was like, wow.
It's
Yep.
language for sure.
Any other
right.
questions?
Online, any questions? Yeah, we're
All right, thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you.
Bye.